Welcome to the second episode of Wand of Whispers. I'm HighTac and I have a very special guest today. Joining me from an undisclosed location in the Pacific time zone, Bill Roper, former vice president of Blizzard North and legendary figure of the gaming industry. Welcome, Bill. How are you?
Oh, great. Hey, thanks for having me on. It was awesome to get your email, and I love the fact that people are still playing and podcasting about War 3. It's awesome.
Only recently podcasting. I feel podcasting has been a thing for some time, but not in the Warcraft 3 universe. But all of a sudden in 2019, everything comes back to the scene and everything awakes. So it has been some time since you made an appearance in the Warcraft universe. Do you want to elaborate on your relationship to Warcraft 3?
Sure, yeah. I mean, when Warcraft 3 came out, I was already up at Blizzard North. I was up there working on the Diablo properties and some other things that never came out, as Blizzard is want to do, right? You know, work on a lot of stuff, but only release the best. And I was still pretty involved with it, and I was always on what we called the strike teams, which were, if you were outside the direct development team, it was how we kept the executives inside the studio still able to contribute to every project. And I headed those up for a while. So with War 3, I started down in Southern California and then had moved to Northern California with the Blizzard North crew, and was still playing it a lot and, you know, throwing out whatever ideas the team would listen to. I think more than anything, just really appreciating, I think a lot of the, at that time, the risks they were taking with the game, Warcraft 1 and Warcraft 2, and then StarCraft really kind of followed a model, right? StarCraft, it kind of exploded things out into controlling just massive numbers of units, especially if you're playing the Zerg, and Warcraft 3 went a completely opposite direction of the other Warcraft games and making it very personal with the heroes. And I think, I remember at the time we tried to coin the term a role-playing strategy game. We wanted to try to transition people from an RTS to an RPS. Didn't really ever catch hold, but I think the spirit was there with the hero units and really what the team tried to accomplish from a very different design perspective than what traditionally we've done with Warcraft.
Okay, so back then you already saw the potential of the game or of this genre. It was not entirely new back then, but apparently I was never a developer. So did you see the potential during that development phase, or at what point? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that we hoped that was there. We were really trying to do something different than at least we had done in the RTS space, by having the hero units and really trying to bring that sense of role playing into a strategy game, right? By having units that not only were named but putting inventories on them, and I think that there were some things about that worked really well, and some other things that were pretty challenging about the way we did it. But I think it was, and we'll probably talk about it a little later, became pretty influential in the games industry, in strategy and breaking outside of just that genre, because of the things that not only we did with it, but I think very importantly what our players did with Warcraft 3.
Okay, and what was it back then when during the development phase? Apparently, the campaign was a very, or is a very big deal in Warcraft 3 still, but never had the potential to keep it alive for 2 decades. Obviously.
Yeah, absolutely not. Right. I mean, it's always multiplayer, right? And it's what players do with it. We always viewed the campaigns as being the thing that was there to introduce you to the lore of the world, what was changing if it was part of a longer running franchise like with Warcraft, or introducing you to it with StarCraft. But then I think really importantly, it was there to show you in a very story driven way how to play all the different units, right? We'd set the scenarios up to take advantage of new units that were getting introduced. So it was a very, I think, drawn out, but hopefully well thought out tutorial almost. Never presented as a tutorial, but we introduce new units, across the course of these lengthy campaigns, and introduce you to the different sides and the similarities and the changes, and tried to make it something that would kind of ease players in. We always had this philosophy of easy to learn and difficult to master. And a part of that was really walking you through, with the campaigns, introductions into what we were trying to accomplish. But the longevity is never going to last off of those campaigns. You play them, they're great, they're stories, they hopefully really immerse you into the universe that we built. But the thing that makes it last for certainly as long as it has, which is just remarkable, is that ability for players to keep trying different things, to keep experimenting, to have this emergent play, and to create. And I think those were really the hallmarks of Warcraft 3, more so than the other Warcraft titles that have given it such a long and rich life.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, I mean, everyone who's stuck with a game for that long like agrees that it's a masterpiece. It took quite some time to develop it. Like I think it was a 3-year phase from the initial announcement on E3. I think in 1999, around that
Probably
time.
right. Pretty quick for Blizzard, but I think 3 years is about right.
Yeah, I mean it takes some time, and from what we read in some of the forums, some of the posts of former former team members of the classics team, like there were a lot of challenges back then with the graphics, a lot of bugs and unknown factors. Do you remember some of the hurdles and concerns during the development phase?
Yeah, I mean, we always were trying to, I think, push the envelope, especially in terms of what we could accomplish with graphics when combined with multiplayer, especially. I mean, it's kind of funny almost to think about it and look back on it now, so many years down the road. But even if you go back to the original Warcraft Orcs and Humans, when we were doing the cinematic sequence, the fly through of the forest that came up to the castle gates, and like that was crazy cool looking at the time. Now it kind of looks like Minecraft a little bit, but then that was wild. And we went to Warcraft 2. We had people saying like, you just can't push that many pixels on the screen with that many players in a 8-player LAN, and things that were, again, you look at them now and it seems so simple and anybody could do that, but at the time, you take it in perspective, it was we were really trying to push the bar. And I think Warcraft 3 was that same thing. We were really trying to up the graphic quality of the Warcraft universe, have far more effects on the screen and units, and then be able to do a lot of context switching and going back and forth between the top-down play of the RTS and calling up all the inventory screens with the heroes, and then trying to figure out a way to then present that all in a very user-friendly format, very customer-facing with the editor, so that players could then start making their own stories. I think was originally our idea with that. So there was a lot of challenges in how we were going to present these things. A lot of UI that we hadn't really done in the strategy titles before, and user experience designs that were sometimes butting heads with what we were trying to do from a technology standpoint and an ease of play standpoint. But I think that was the great thing about the Warcraft 3 team is they were just really dedicated to trying to make a very different experience in the strategy genres than they had ever done before. And I think it was that kind of either craziness or bravery to go do something really different that paid off and really shows in the end product.
And you were granted the time back then. So do you think, like, with apparently the gaming industry changed, like you're still part of it. Also Blizzard has changed a lot. Do you think a development team would be given the same amount of time, or could be given the same amount of time today that you had back then to really shape the game and create something that would last for that long.
I think that that possibility is there, but it probably is still with the same level of rarity that Blizzard had. I mean, it wasn't like every studio got that chance. You know, Blizzard
Yep.
has always been very unique in that way that they've taken the time required to make it right. You know, that was especially important when you're thinking, you know, 20 years back, you know, 15, 20 years, where you didn't have live services. You didn't put a game out and patch it on day one and, you know, have updates that occurred. This was the times where you were making a game, you got it on a disc. You had to make sure that it was right, because if it wasn't, that was a huge problem. You threw it over the fence, you know, and then the dev team would go and take, you know, a couple 3 weeks off because they'd been crunching like crazy to get it out. Just not the case anymore. So, you know, then it was just such a very different way of thinking about it. And so Blizzard always pushed uh, hard to take as much time as possible. And, you know, we had tons of meetings over the year with whoever the owners were. That would change every couple of years. Our joke was that every 2 or 3 E3s there'd be some new, you know, owner company name above the Blizzard brand, you know, at the shows. Um, but you know, whether it was, you know, originally with Davidson and Associates, or later with companies like, you know, Vivendi, or you know, Universal, or whoever, now Activision Blizzard, you know, as it kept changing over the years, it was almost like we had to keep going back to the beginning and explaining, this is why we take as long as we do, but we're never going to just do it for the sake of doing it. We're always going to tell you, and we would tell the people who, you know, at the level above us were writing the checks and cared, that they would know why we were doing that. We were very open about that, and show them as best we could what the benefit would be in waiting. You know, and I think much to their credit over the years, those companies believed, right? I mean, they'd get antsy. It's like, yes, you did that before, but you haven't done a thing for us yet. How's this going to turn out? And I think that was a really big deal, um, for them to actually say, you know what, we're going to trust in what you've done before. We're going to trust that you know what you're doing, and give you that time. And I think that's a thing that is a challenge in the games industry, is that we're, you know, not used to that. We're used to terrible things like crunch and burnout, and, you know, feeling like a thing came out before it was ready. So Blizzard's always been in that unique space, and I think there will be developers, um, you know, that will, in those rare occasions, get the opportunity to do that. You know, I think if you look at a company like, for example, Ubisoft, they're very much focused on taking as much time as they need to, right? I think they just said that like 3 of their games are being delayed because they want to take longer to work on them, and their stock took a hit. You know, they're a publicly traded company. That's a big deal to say that. Um, and I think that when you see a company do that for the right reasons, and then be given the support to do that, you know, very commonly, even though it is a very uncommon occurrence, commonly when it's done, the result is very, very good. And it makes me wonder why companies don't do that more, why publishers don't do that more, right? I always feel like the publisher's job should be to make the development team's job easier and to make the game better, because ultimately that's what the players want. They want the best game they can get. And when you don't have the time to do that, for whatever reasons, for any of a thousand reasons, that's when you see games suffer, and that's when, you know, players don't have the time that they want to have. And to be honest, developers don't want to do that either, right? Nobody wants it to happen, except at some point somebody is tired of waiting. If
Yeah,
they're the
for
ones writing
sure.
the checks, the game comes out.
Yeah, for sure. And it's the same with Reforged right now, being
Mm.
around the corner. Like being with the game for 20 years now. Have you followed the path of Warcraft 3 and the like since you left Blizzard in 2003?
Yeah, you know, a bit. It's interesting. I definitely followed with with surprise and delight, the games that spawned out of it,
Hmm.
and the genres that spawned out of it, and just the fact that it's maintained such a strong and devoted following from players is amazing. I love the idea of Reforged, right? On saying, hey, we're going to make this playable on modern systems. I like the fact in what Blizzard's tried to do with things like WoW Classic, or original StarCrafts. Like thing is like saying even if they update the graphics or they modernize it in terms of how the technology can run it, they kind of purposely program the flaws in there, right? They want to present it warts and all because that's part of the magic. Not everything's perfect. If you're staying true to what the product was, but just making it so it runs on modern day systems, I think that's really interesting. The graphics become an interesting discussion, right? How much of what the graphics were, depending on what they could be. Is that a positive thing if you update them, or is kind of the representation of those units or those characters part of the charm? I think that becomes a very personal taste issue.
Yeah.
But you look at the StarCraft units and what they did with the updating there, and I love seeing all those heroes and all those units rendered at a much higher resolution. I think they look really cool, and I think they did a nice job of making them feel like just higher resolution versions of what was there, without dramatically altering them for the most part. So the thing that I'm hoping they do, and I tweeted out about it, that if Blizzard wants to have me do some voice work, I'd love to do it. I think that'd be the great thing is to try to, if they, because they'll go back in and redo all the voice files, if they do that, to just get higher quality recordings, that they bring back as many of the original voice actors as possible, because I think that's so much in the Blizzard games, a part of it. I got started there doing audio, doing music, for the PC version of Blackthorn, and then the first things that I did at the company was voiceover work,
Yeah.
both writing and doing character voices. And so I think that's just became such a part of, especially the craft games, those unit responses and the weird quirky humor and the clicking and the pissed sounds and everything, that it'd be great if they kind of went that extra mile and try to get as many of the original actors and actresses in as possible to do the voices. I think it's part of the authenticity for something like Reforged.
Would make total sense. I totally agree. I think it's a very thin line in general. On one hand, you want to like satisfy all the like all the old guys that, or these old guys that stuck with the game for that long, and that do really like everyone that still plays the game or never stopped apparently likes the graphics and all that, or the voices and whatever else Warcraft 3 was for them or is for them. And I think Blizzard chose the right approach to really plug Reforged on top of the old game, so that you can decide whether you want to play with old graphics or new ones. But on the other hand, that bears some additional challenges, because you can't just program. Like on one hand, it may save some time that you don't have to program everything from scratch. But on the other hand, obviously it comes with some additional challenges that you just plug it on top, and that you may not be able to change everything to an environment that you would have in an entirely new game, like when it comes to functionality. So it's still, that's why I think it will be interesting to see if on one hand, like the ones that still play the game, if we like it, and obviously even if we don't like it, if it has the potential to encourage or to get new players, in, which we need to keep the game alive for another 10 years.
Yeah, and I think that you make a great point, right? It's a fine line to walk, to make sure that you're doing right by the people that have been there this whole time and are playing and are ardent fans of the game. But at the same time, make it something where if someone's never played it before, it feels uh, accessible enough and modern enough, right? I like the fact that they're with these ideas like they're doing with Reforged, is that it's really about, I think, mostly just trying to update it so it runs on modern systems really well, right? And they can take advantage of all the technological advances that have happened in engines and in connectivity between players and things like that, um, to be able to keep it around for another 20 years.
Yeah.
So, I think it's going to be really fun to see how it all comes out. Um, but I think it's a good nod to, with all the things that are going on, and I mean Blizzard's in some controversy right now, but there's still so many people there that just care about the games. They just want to make games. They just want to do cool stuff, and then to me, like, the classic series of things they're doing really feels like that, right? These are people that love these games, developers that love these games as much as the players, and they just want to figure out what can we do that would be cool that lets everybody play again. Blizzard doesn't have to do WoW Classic, they don't have to do Reforged, they don't have to do StarCraft, but they do.
Yeah.
And those are not things that I'm sure anyone whose pure focuses on ROI, and the bottom line looks at and says, "Oh, this is a killer moneymaker," right? They're better off putting their bets somewhere else. But at the same time, they recognize how important the players are, and they've always been a company that has had that first and foremost in mind. So, even though it's been an awfully long time since I've been there, I think one of the things you'll find from the vast majority of people that worked at Blizzard, is we all kind of still have that Blizzard blue running through our veins. I mean, it's where I got my start. I spent 9 years there. It was fantastic. I learned so much, of what would go on to service me really well over the last, 25 years in the games industry. Um, but I mean, it always starts with the players, and we always wanted to make games that we wanted to play because we felt we were pretty representative of what people were playing. So, I like the fact that they're dedicated enough to that to keep it alive and keep it out there. And I mean, even when they went back and they bought the rights back for Lost Vikings and Rock and Roll Racing, and then reissued those at one point. It's
Yeah.
just a cool thing to do, and I'm glad that they're in a position to be able to do that.
Yeah. Still, I think that there must be some expectation from Blizzard to really push Warcraft 3 Reforged out into the market and have some success with it, also financially. I assume so. Do you think just from a genre and industry perspective, do you think RPS still has the potential that it had 20 years ago? Or yeah,
Well, I mean, it's so interesting, right? Because you look at games that are more, I don't know, focused, if you will, distilled, right? They've taken sections out of a classic RTS and out of Warcraft 3 specifically, and then, excuse me, and then made entire genres out of there that have gone to be like massive, right? Like tower defense came out of Warcraft 3, Dota, and then League of Legends, right? The whole MOBA came out of Warcraft 3, which is crazy, right? And this is people just saying, "Hey, we've got this editor. We can try to do different things. Look at these amazing pieces we have to work with, but I want to take a different look. I want to take a different bend on what you can do with the gameplay." So it's really interesting. I think that real time strategy has, because of when it entered the games industry and the fact that it's been around as long as it has, but is still uniquely competitive, right? It's a very different skill set and mindset when you're competing in an RTS than if you're playing, anything from Call of Duty to Rocket League, right? I mean, there's tons of great games in tons of different genres, but RTSs always feel a little special and unique to me, especially in the competitive space. I mean, look at how well and long StarCraft has survived, as a competitive esport. I mean, really one of, if not the first esport especially in South Korea. So, I think RTSs, there's always going to be a place for them. I think that has been, in a lot of ways, a bit supplanted by the more focused gameplay of something like, a Dota or a League of Legends, which is taking the hero units and focusing on those and automating just about everything else. Um, there is something really challenging and really interesting about doing that back and forth, right, of managing an economy and then managing military units. Warcraft 3, I think, was a real challenge in that area, and where the level of complexity is really a lot higher than most RTSs, is the fact that you've got your economy that you're running, you have your battlefield full of units that you're running, but then you also have the like micro control of the hero units. So I think that adds this different layer than you see in a lot of RTSs. It's certainly, I think, in a lot of ways far more complex to play, more demanding to play than StarCraft. And you look at a League of Legends or Dota, and they're like, they focused on those hero units, or they just pulled that part of it out. So the fact that there's so much there, and the fact, I think, that RTSs focus on this idea of kind of splitting your brain, right? From, I am in the middle of a battle, I'm controlling the battle, I've got micromanagement of that battle, but at the same time, I have a whole economy and a building expansion that I'm playing. Makes it something that you just don't really see, and I think something that's always going to be challenging. Um, just like there's still a very big and very popular market for turn-based strategy games, right? It's the greatest thing about gaming is that we aren't cannibalizing ourselves as an industry. There's just more and more and more people coming into gaming, and I think it'll be really interesting to see what Reforged does, because I would guess a lot of it's going to play off of the fact that this was a game that spawned a bunch of other things that you probably know and you probably played, and go back and play the original, but updated for today. And I just think it's going to be fascinating, and I'd love to see it do super well, just because I think it'd be great to get a bunch of people who maybe have never even played more of a classic RTS, to try it out, because it is something that is, so we always used to joke that we were the best, like we were the best StarCraft players, or we were the best Warcraft players, until about 2 weeks after the game came out, and they're like, okay, and everybody's waiting for us, right?
Yeah,
There's just so much there, and I'm always so constantly impressed with players that perform at these just amazing levels of, it's almost like a dance, right? As they move back and forth between bases and units and commands, and with War 3 and what they're doing in terms of managing the heroes, and just it makes it, I think, a very different game to watch as well. Like a game like Fortnite is fantastic and incredibly popular, and people have amazing time playing it. But it's not that great to watch. Whereas something, from just a spectator standpoint, but you watch something like Warcraft 3, and it's really compelling. You're seeing, these tactics evolve over the battlefield, and it's one of those things where the more you know about the more you know about the game, the more interesting it is. You start seeing the strategies, unfold, and I love that. I just love actually watching games, because it's so interesting to see how people approach the challenge that's in front of them of beating the other player.
for sure. Arguably, it's also like taking more time though to really learn it, and it has a steeper learning curve than many of the other games that became popular in the last decade. So that worries me a bit, that Warcraft 3 will remain too complex for like the masses. That we don't expect it to become as popular as some of the mobile games that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
still, it will remain kind of complex, and there are many players active that do have 10 years of experience, and it is just difficult to catch up if you're brand new to the game and you have no idea what happens on the screen, and on top, and that's something that I realize when I see the design, potentially the new design of Reforged, from what we saw so far. On one hand, apparently it's like it's looking different, and it's 2019 technology, but on the other hand, it makes it more difficult also to really see something on the battlefield, because it lacks this certain level of abstractness that you had in the initial Warcraft 3 design. Apparently, as you mentioned earlier, it's back then you had no choice. Like, that was the graphics, that was state of the art. But it proved, I think, that it has some advantage to stick to some level of pixelated graphics. So I'm very curious to see if RTS still works with 2019 graphics.
Well, I mean, that's part of it too, right? It is because you're controlling so much, right? Because you're thinking about so many things. Elements like silhouette, right? Like how a unit is represented, and that I can instantly look at the screen and tell the difference between units, becomes really important. So it becomes, to a degree, far less about the exact detail of the models and the artwork, right? It's not about that highest level of fidelity possible that you want to see in something like an RPG or an FPS, because you're looking at it from more of a god's eye view, because your concern is that when I jump to a part of the map, I need to, as instantly as possible, be able to parse in my head what's happening, right?
Exactly.
So I need to be able to see size and silhouette and like know immediately, oh, these are these units, that's how I respond to that. Like, that's kind of the magic of it. So it is interesting to, again, I think as long as they would try to stay true, right, to that how vital that silhouette is. It can look a lot cooler and look different, and the effects can be awesome and everything, but I have to be able to know immediately when I go somewhere what that unit is. So there's some elements of it that just aren't as important.
Exactly. And apparently whoever has looked, like we all have looked at these models for almost 2 decades. So at least I personally don't know if I'm looking at these new designs. Apparently I can't recognize some of the characters immediately, but I don't know if it's because I'm so used to the old design, or if it's because the new design is too detailed. So that's one of my worries when I'm looking at the new stuff. But still, I guess that's a difficulty. It's very difficult to satisfy the players that are still active in a game that has been out there for that long. And
you get used to all the little nuances, right? You get used to exactly how something looks, exactly how something moves, even how it sounds, right? And so it'll be interesting to see how quickly people can kind of reset their minds, right, to that.
Yeah.
Like you said, if I look at a thing, whoa, what was that? Right? It's making you stop or pause or even consider for, just even a split second or a second, really changes what you're used to doing. So I think it's going to be, I love the idea behind it, right? And I really hope that it in some ways continues to vitalize. I'm not going to say revitalizes, because there's such a great fan base out there still for it, but that it brings more people into it, and makes it something that is, I don't know, just like re-sparks what was there, for a new generation of players.
Yeah, I think we all hope that it's going to regain some level of popularity. But yeah, going back to your point about the voices, I think especially the voices are more timeless even than the graphics. So I think many players are worried that the new voices are not going to be like the old ones. And apparently, as you say, they Blizzard does not seem to have approached um, the old characters or the old voices. So yeah,
Yeah, I don't know if part of that is because they are reusing any of the old voice files. It depends on how they stored them, and it's long enough ago where I don't remember what fidelity recorded everything at. Knowing Glenn Stafford, who was did all the sound there at the time, it was amazing. He was always all that crew, Glenn um, and Tracy and everybody just was so conscious about not only preserving the work that they'd done, but just recording it at the highest fidelity possible. So it'll be interesting to see how much of it that they're actually re-recording, or if they're going to try to reuse what's already there. If they have great initial files to go from.
what is your favorite unit phrase from the ones that you spoke for Warcraft 3? Do you
Yeah,
remember?
it's really interesting. By the time we got to Warcraft 3, I think I only had a couple of 3 basic units in there. I know I always loved the orcs. It's I always feel like when at some point, and I should probably actually record it soon. I want to record a couple of thousand funny orc lines. So whenever I end up shuffling off this mortal coil, I can have a memorial plaque somewhere that has a button that people can come up and push and get keep pushing buttons until they get all the weird rare responses. But it's kind of funny. Like and it's I always like the funny ones, right? The ones where stop poking me and all the I can't say it super loud because my 2-year-old's asleep upstairs. But I always, for some reason, just like the work complete. I just it, and I think that in my head when I'm ticking things off of a checklist. If I've got a list of things I have to get done for the day or the week, and I'm like, oh, I check off a big one in my head. I work complete. Like, yep, there it is. Boom. Just to knock that one off.
Yeah.
They were so fun to do, and it was just the kind of thing where we had I remember with the original Warcraft, we were recording lines, and I was in there. It was Glenn and I in his office, which was this it was the closet that was in the office space that they had converted into his little studio office. There was no sound booth. There was, he would sit in Glenn's office next to him. And it was in this former closet that was then heavily padded with sound material because it was the quietest place in the building. And you just sit next to each other, and I'd have a mic in front of me and record lines. And we just sat there one time. I said, it'd be really funny is, I said, I've noticed when we're playing it and we're testing, I'll kind of sit there while I'm waiting for something to build. I'll just kind of click on the same unit, just out of habit, like you're just waiting with a little nervous tick. And I'm like, I wonder if other people that. What if we did a thing where if you just clicked on a unit over and over again, like it would start to get pissed off, like it would acknowledge the fact that someone was poking it, right? And so that's where the stop poking me and all that stuff came from. And we went so we recorded a bunch of them, and we're like, okay, maybe this is funny. I don't know. Let's try it. So we went and got Bob Fitch, who was one of the engineers, and still at Blizzard as far as I know. And Bob thought it was funny, and so Bob programmed it, and we didn't tell anybody, right? And then we just a build came out, and it was in, and we were interested to see if people would discover it just through the course of play, like anybody who might get the game was, and eventually somebody ran into it. And the way we always knew that something was kind of a viral success, we knew we might have something, is if someone discovered something in the game, whether it was gameplay or the first time they saw a unit or something like the pissed sounds, if they came running out of their office to go tell someone else about it and then make them see it, we knew it was good. And so, I have very distinct memories of people running out of their office like, oh, whoa, what was that? And they'd run to someone else's office like, click, 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 click on the unit, click, 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 and then people laughing, and then it just became a thing, right? It just became this kind of hallmark, of the craft games, which was really fun because it was just a silly idea, and sometimes you never know what's going to stick. So
sorry. Yeah.
no, I just say it's like that's the kind of thing that I love about games, right? Is that we're not trying to cure serious diseases. We're not trying to send somebody to the moon. The risks are not the same if we do something wrong. But we've become such a big industry that I think a lot of the joy of game development has disappeared for an awful lot of people, right? It just becomes like, get this thing done. It has to be done to this quality and out at this certain time. And a lot of people just feel like they're grinding away, where it should be I don't know, it should be fun. We're making games. Try silly stuff. Try something weird. Yeah, and I think that's why I love playing indie games.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the things I've always loved about Blizzard. Like, they always have this like kind of sideways grin, when they're making stuff. And it's even still today. You look at Hearthstone and you click around and you find some weird little things, and buildings have animations you don't expect, and there's always a good sense of humor. Or even when you look at something that's not as purposely like designed to be funny, but has a depth to it. Like, I loved in Overwatch when they put out all those little movies about the characters, right? They didn't have to do that. That's just somebody saying, we should offer people a deeper insight into this world we've built, right? And these characters they're playing. And it's that passion for what you're doing, that when it's given a chance to be expressed, I think is what makes great products and make great games. So I am very hopeful that takes more control in the last push on Reforged, as well as everything they keep doing. As opposed to, hey, can we get it out in this time frame for this much money, and that means it's going to give us this return.
Yeah, and it seems Blizzard is taking their time to get the game out, and it's more the fan base that's so used to see games being released after like 6 months, or getting the betas after 6 months, that everyone's so like, no one's used to wait anymore. And I mean, we're waiting for this since a decade. So what is a year in comparison if you get a great game in return, instead of getting something prematurely after 6 months? So I think that's it's a bit tricky, and obviously with pre-sale and some of these things that were not available 20 years ago. So I'm not sure. Did you pre-sell some games even back then? No, right? It was just like you could order it maybe at your local.
Yeah, you could pre-order at your local game store.
Exactly.
Right? But no one was ordering directly from us.
Yeah.
It was difficult. You tried to work with retailers to see how their pre-orders were looking, and maybe you'd adjust the initial run that you'd make. But it was certainly better than making by that point CDs or DVDs. Was certainly a lot better than the counterparts previously over on the console side when they were making cartridges. Right, that was the absolute worst. Or even when we were having to press, previously to War III, when we were having to do things like still put things on disc.
Yeah.
Right. And you're like, okay, we're going to ship this, and it comes on 8 discs. And it's like, oh, this takes so long to make. And you have to, there's a fairly higher rate of failure. And it just, I mean, so many of those things that used to be the norm just don't exist anymore. Now it's just about, well, did we upload the right file? let's test it. Okay. I mean, digital, whether it's streaming with what we're seeing, in the to the future with Stadia and things like that, or whether it's just now where I'm, when you go and you digital download things, um, it's so different, right? It's so different, and it has huge pluses and huge minuses. But it's one of the things that I personally love about the games industry is that it's always changing, right? The platforms, the genres, the players that you're reaching, every 3 or 4 years, it feels like it's an entirely new industry, and it's daunting, and it's really challenging sometimes, but at the same time, boy, it's never dull, right? It's always so exciting, and trying to figure out what can you do now, right? And what works and what doesn't work. And sometimes you'll have an idea that maybe didn't work before, but now you look at it and you're like, oh, huh, boy, that would sure make sense now. Uh, you know, so I think it's great that companies and Blizzard among them are even just trying to look at things that they've done previously that were successful that are very difficult for people to access now because of the media that they were released on, um, and trying to support those. So I'm hopeful that the amazing War 3 community that does exist and has stuck with it for all these years, will hopefully go into it, um, a little with open hearts, right, and say like, okay, this is great. Wow, they're trying something. Yeah, it doesn't look exactly the same or sound exactly the same, those things, but at its core, if its essence is still there,
Mhm.
right, like grasp onto that and enjoy it. Um, which is something I know. I just feel like the to wax somewhat poetic for a moment. I think it's something the world needs right now. Right, it's like let's approach things with joy rather than negativity. So I try to look at things and say like, oh, here's what I can be excited about for that. Right, with me, I think like the War 3 Reforged, and it's like, this is cool. They're trying to bring this out so people can play today, and maybe people that never saw it and or experienced it, can enjoy it, and hopefully this just keeps it going and keeps it there in the consciousness.
Yeah, and many people seem to be very like be tired of new things very quickly. So I think thinking back 2 3 years ago, it was unthinkable to get a reforged Warcraft 3 or remastered Warcraft 3 basically. And now where we do get some new designs and where we do see how it may look, it's like or we need to remind ourselves that it's like if someone would have told us 2 years ago that we would get all that, it would have been like maybe we would have guessed maybe in 2025, but not in 2019. So
Mm-hmm.
it's also fast paced like around us and media and the gaming industry. So it's I think we should appreciate the work that's being put into our beloved game.
Mm.
Yeah, and I mean balance also, like that would be my last topic, it's a very tricky one, and probably the one that's being discussed most frequently. It's just difficult to balance a game that has been out there for that long, and
Mm-hmm.
it
Yeah,
seems
that seems
impossible.
like a thing you
Yeah.
don't mess with, right? Just like, like, and I think that's the thing, right? Is when you're either building off the code, which seems like that's almost impossible, right? Like you'd have to go in and at least be doing a pretty large amount of replumbing, if you will, is keeping that balance the same and keeping all the little quirks and like kind of warts and all, any imperfections there you have to keep there, right? You have to like stop yourself from trying to fix a problem, that hasn't been fixed, because you're ultimately, updating an experience in some ways, but it's vital that you're recreating it. It's almost like, if you think of it like reenactors, right? That do shows, or that do in the U.S. we have these things, Renaissance fairs, and some of them are, just like a fantasy fair. Klingons show up, and all kinds of things. And some other ones are like very tend to be historically accurate for the Elizabethan period in England, down to what type of materials they use to create the costumes and how they're hand sewn and all these things. And to me, something like Reforged needs to be using modern technology and technique, but as much as you can, exactly recreating the experience, right? Again, even if there's some updates, even if there's some graphic polish, even if it's easier for you to get online or distribute it and things like that, it has to come down that when you play it, it needs to feel the same. And so that's something that I truly am interested in seeing how closely they've done that, right? Because I think that is the most challenging thing to do, almost to an extent, less from the technological challenges, certainly, but more just trying to get that nuance. I mean, I would go find the best, like the absolute best War 3 players, the ones that have been playing it, the ones in the community that are still there and active, and just hold like a very special, very special closed beta with them, and say, we just want you guys and gals to just play the hell out of this and tell us if it feels right.
Yeah, I hope they will take that time doing exactly that, just to get it right, and not change the feeling of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Well, time will tell. I'm excited. Yeah. We'll get on and play. I have not played War 3 itself in quite some time, but we should. You guys should. We'll get some people together in the community. I'll leave this to you to do that when Reforged comes out. We'll all get our copies, and then we can get online and beat the crap out of me because I won't be any good at it anymore.
Let's do it.
but we'll have fun. And that's the most important part.
Yeah. You might be a pro player in disguise and just.
Oh, and I guarantee you I'm not. I will guarantee you I'm not.
You just trained for 2 decades.
It would have to be some like crazy like sleeper agent, like in my DNA thing that would happen. At the end, like my eyes would haze over, and then it'd be at the end on a victory screen, and it'd be like, oh, I don't know what happened. Was I unconscious? Yeah, because I can tell you right now, it's not because I know what I'm doing anymore. But I think that's kind of some of the joy of it, right? Is I'm actually, now that like I'm, we're talking about, I'm thinking about like this is going to be a fun bit of rediscovery, for me. Like this is great. I'll get it, play it. It's gonna be neat. Like kind of playing a thing again. I haven't really, thought about that intimately, in quite a while. So I think that's part of the reason they're doing it is for people that were there and loved it at one point and just haven't over the years stayed with it. It's like, oh, okay, here's a great chance to re-engage. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it must be even more amazing for you, like someone who has been involved in the initial development. So you have been part of that history, basically. So yeah, let's see. Maybe next week, maybe during BlizzCon, we will get to know more. But even if it takes a bit longer, then I guess we should all stay calm and just see. Let's just see how the final result looks like.
Yeah, it's gonna be at the very least interesting, and I'm hoping exciting and something that we'll all just be able to enjoy. So I'll keep a little faith. Keep a little faith in the old school Blizzard crew that's still there. That they're gonna pull it off.
It's still Blizzard. Somewhere in there, it's still Blizzard. Bill, I highly appreciate that you took the time to join me. Was a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely, HighTac. It's great. Thanks so much for reaching out and for inviting me on the show. It's great, and let's definitely chat again at the very least when Reforged comes out, because I think it'd be a blast to play, and maybe we can do a live stream or something.
Let's do that.
Twitch
Yeah,
or whatever would be great.
that'd be great.
Just to get in and screw around and see what we remember.
For
At
sure.
least for me. I mean, everybody else is like, "Oh, Bill, we've been playing it since it came out. Can't believe you're still not playing." But I'll have to have a few days at least from when it comes out to when we play to reacquaint myself.
Yeah, we have time.
It's
We
not
have
a
time.
complete embarrassment.
It will be once we have it. It will be there for some time. So
Absolutely.
it will be accessible.
Great. This has been great. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you. Have a great night. It's late for you, and
That's all right. It's well worth it.
and speak to you soon.
All right.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Cheers.